We're here with Paul Dini at San Diego Comic-Con. Thanks a lot for meeting with us.
My pleasure, Brian. Happy to be here.
So you are here for a special Blu-ray release. Explain a little bit more about that, what you're here for.
Well, Warner's asked me to come on the panel and talk about the Blu-ray release of Tom and Jerry and the Looney Tunes, and I was thrilled to do it. And, it's like I've had no involvement in these cartoons originally. I was not alive when they were made, but I am a lifelong fan of the cartoons, and I'm somebody who wants to see them, very passionately wants to see them preserved and kept in their as close to original state. And barring just restoring the original prints, this is the next best way to go, is to put them out in a cleaned up, restored form on Blu-ray.
And so what is it that you think that's so appealing about these classic cartoons that would be appealing to someone of this generation?
There's something eternal about Tom and Jerry and the Looney Tunes. They just always work. The Looney Tunes are not... They're drawn in an appealing way, but they're not necessarily cute characters. They're not even necessarily nice characters, right. But there's something about the human nature in them, and I think that always people find that very appealing, and that the jokes are always funny. Some of the cultural references might whiz by people a little bit, but they're fast, they're funny. If nothing else, they're just great to look at, and they're great to study. Tom and Jerry, you don't need dialogue for them. It's simple slapstick humor, but also cleverly directed, and again, with an amazing amount of appeal in the drawings.
Now, you said it's close to their original format. A lot of the Looney Tunes, a lot of the Tom and Jerry cartoons in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s were sort of censored, if you will, or pieces were cut out of them for new sensibilities. Is some of that being added back into these originals?
I haven't seen them yet, but I believe so. I believe they're trying to make these as close to the original releases as they can. And even if that includes a disclaimer, like these are of the time, that's fine. The people buying these films should be able to buy them in the form that they were released, that the directors intended them to be seen, and then the judgment call falls on the parents or the brothers or sisters of younger kids if they want the kids to see them in that form, or if they want to have a discussion about the content.
Well, we turned out okay, didn't we?
I think so. I can take a hit from an anvil at 60 feet in the air and bounce right back up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or just here, hold this exploding piece.
Yeah. All I get is a light singe.
So, transition for a minute into comics, which you're also involved in. Mm-hmm. Do you see some of the same things in comics that makes for an appealing long-term character or long-term title that you see in animation, or do you think that there's something different that needs to be involved in comics?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I think that there are certain characters that can go for year after year of with consistency. I think look at all the comic strips. Just this morning I was reading an anthology of Peanut strips from 30 years ago, and that stuff is bright and fresh and appealing to me as the day Charles Schultz drew it. There are other things like certain superhero comics that I think that they kind of walk with a reader for a while, and then the reader either goes on or stays with those characters. And then I think you're looking at a time where those characters have to be either refreshed or brought up to date, or perhaps reinvented a little bit. Times change, and so characters change with them. Something like going back to Looney Tunes for a little bit. You may not know who Wendell Willkie is, but you understand that the characters are making a joke out of somebody who was popular at the time. And yet something like Tom and Jerry is, there'll always be cats, there'll always be mice, they'll always, chase each other around, that sort of thing. Those remain eternal.
And what kind of upcoming projects do you have coming out soon?
Oh, gosh, what am I working on? I'm working on a bunch of animation. I'm working with Disney and Marvel on adapting some of their characters in animation. I'm working with Warner Brothers on a character that I love very much, and I can't talk about it because it's NDA time, but looking at getting that done in the near future. Just sort of working for everybody, keeping my hands in comics, and just waiting to see what's next.
Okay. So we're going to wrap this up the way we always do by asking you, what's your issue? What is that comic that you've read that when you're sitting around with your friends talking comics, you're like, oh, this was crazy, this was out there?
Yes. Well, my wife and I discuss this comic book an awful lot, and it's an old DC title, or at least they own the rights to it. And my wife is passionate about getting this comic up and running again. And I said, look, if you are able to do this, I will gladly write it with you. It's called Madame Fatal, and it's an old comic about an actor who fights crime dressed up as an old lady. Madame Fatal was a crime fighter, and it was actually this kind of He-Man type guy who'd dress up as a little old granny lady and go out and bop people and and fight crime. And it is the most ludicrous concept ever. And my wife adores us, and I was reading some of the old issues, and I go, this is great, okay, And I'm sure with DC's new reboot, there's absolutely no place at all for Madame Fatal, but I think at some point we'll go in and pitch it, just for no other reason of, we can say how we got thrown out of the office.
Was that played straight, or was this a comedy piece?
It was comedy. It was nutty. I mean, it was back in a time where, let's run this, let's see if anybody reads this for a while, so...
All right. Well, thank you very much for meeting with us, and have a fantastic show.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian.